Before I get into the formal presentation, I just wanted to give a quick introduction about Ariel and Aon Hewitt. Ariel Investments is one of the largest and oldest African-American owned investment companies in the United States. We're also a mutual fund company. Ariel Education Initiative, the nonprofit affiliate of Ariel Investments, was founded in 1989 by the founder of Ariel Investments, John Rogers Jr. Aon Hewitt is the global leader in human capital consulting and outsourcing with 29,000 colleagues in 90 offices around the world. Aon Hewitt administers retirement plan benefits for more than 11 million participants. So now that you know who we are, let's move on to the actual study itself. Ariel has been studying the racial wealth gap since 1998. What we've been doing is we've been doing the Black Investor Survey, which looks at 500 African Americans and 500 whites through a telephone survey, and it's basically a behavioral survey on how they spend, save, and invest their money. In 2008, Ariel and Hewitt decided to come together to study actual 401k savings and investing behavior at major corporations by race. This was the first time that had ever been done. We received a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation, and we asked several think tanks to join us. This resulted in the most comprehensive study of 401k data ever, and we entitled it 401k Plans in Living Color, the Ariel Hewitt Study. Data collection methods were as follows. Ariel Hewitt reached out to the largest companies in the United States via data collection letters. We were able to get 57 companies to participate in this study. Now, the more interesting aspect of this is that 56 of these 57 companies were Fortune 500 companies. The average size of each company was about 51,000 employees, which yielded over 3 million participants for us. So that was very significant for us. As you can see, the data was collected as of 12/31/07, so this was prior Great Recession, and the study population is given on the slide. Now, the one thing I did want to point out was that the advantage of collecting data in this method is that the source is actual payroll and record-keeping data. We have found in prior research that participants are not always aware of their own individual behavior. They don't know how much they're saving, what they're saving, where they're saving it, and as a result, our data components are credible. At the same time, this approach does have limitations, which we'll discuss later. Just wanted to give you a quick study of the industries that are represented. Again, majority of them belong to Fortune 500 companies, and you can kind of see the breakdown right there of all the different industries that were there. Next slide just kind of shows the participant level data that was collected from each of the employers. So you can get a good indication of what we actually were able to see. Next slide just gives definitions of the different aspects that we looked at in each DC plan. These are the 5 major components we looked at as indicators of what was going on between the different races. The important thing to see here is that you can see that there are various measures that were gathered. While we did request additional information, such as who was subject to automatic enrollment, there were inconsistencies, and therefore we were not able to use those types of data. So we kind of stuck to this uniformity that you see here. Now, there were certain limitations. Of course, the data request went across various service providers, so we were limited in the uniformity of the information we could collect, because we can't obviously collect the same data from all service providers, so we weren't able to get that from all service providers. So again, we just limited it to the things that we had. The equity assumptions were simplified. So for balanced and pre-mixed portfolios, we assumed they had 60% in equity, and self-directed brokerage, we assumed they had 50% in equity. Another major issue that we had was that although we could identify certain behaviors, we couldn't identify through the data why these behaviors existed. So that was an important limitation of the study. And then finally, we were limited to DC plan data. We didn't look at defined benefit plans, stock portfolios, IRAs, et cetera. So what were our results? So as you can see, the results were quite interesting. African Americans and Hispanics trailed their white and Asian counterparts in participation and contribution, the percentage invested in equities, and they were more likely to take loans and withdrawals. Now, the one thing I did want to point out that's not always transparent is the average percentage in equities. That's important because our research has shown that equities over any other type of investment has returned more over the long run. So I mean, a lot of you might not believe that considering the stock market events that have happened over the last couple of years, but that is actually true. So that's the fastest and best way to build wealth. So that's why we point that out. And the interesting aspect is we've been asked what happens when you actually compare that to white behavior, and we've actually done a regression-adjusted comparison, adjusting for factors such as salary, job tenure, age, and we still found significant differences. When compared to whites with similar characteristics, African Americans were 7% less likely to participate. And when they did, the contribution was 11% lower. Hispanics were 6% less likely to participate, and their contribution was 6% lower. Now, Asians over-indexed in almost every major category. Asians were 3% more likely to participate, and their average contribution was actually 21% higher. And finally, we found that African Americans were 7% less likely to be in equities, and Hispanics were about 1% less likely. Now, the things that we're always worried about is leakage, and we call those at Ariel the savings killers. So that's loans and withdrawals. Now, we recognize that loans are important because we found in our behavioral studies and our anecdotal studies that the ability to take a loan actually encourages more African Americans to participate in 401k plans. So we do not believe that they should be eliminated. That's an important point to make here. So you can see there are huge differences between Asian and white population versus African and Hispanic population when taking out loans. Again, with the regression-adjusted analysis, we found that African Americans were 86% more likely to have a loan and 167% more likely to have a withdrawal. Hispanics were 53% more likely to have a loan and 50% more likely to have a withdrawal. So you can see, even when you adjust for common factors, it becomes just more of an amplified issue. So then, as you can imagine, all these led to lower account balances across every single level. We wanted to show the average, and then we wanted to show what the median household income band looked like, which was the second highest income band that we had. And then at the highest income band, you can see there's still amazing differences between African American and white account balances at the end of the day. So moving on to the OPM study, interestingly enough, on May 26, 2010, Senator Herb Kohl released a study by OPM examining the TSP plan participation rates by ethnicity and gender. And we thought this was great. This study was conducted at the Senator's request, and OPM noted that the Ariel Hewitt study served as a catalyst for their study. You can see some of the attributes of it. The sample size was about 1.5 million. All minorities were placed in one group, so it was minorities versus non-minorities, and loans and withdrawals were not examined formally. As for the results, the participation rates were much higher than what we saw in our study for minorities. But as you can see, participation, average deferral rate, and more concentration in equities was still higher for whites compared to minorities. And the average TSP account balance was still much higher for whites compared to other minorities. Now, this was consistent almost across all income levels, except at the $150,000 and plus level. Minorities did participate at a slightly higher rate and contributed a little bit more, but they still had about a $6,000 smaller average balance than non-minorities. As you can see, the differences here for the less than 50,000 to 150,000. They also looked at gender, which was quite interesting. Although women participated at a slightly higher rate, they deferred less and were more likely to be exclusively invested in the conservative G fund. The female average balance was nearly 20% that below of the men's balance. Now, Ariel Hewitt's study, although it focused more on race, we also looked at gender. As you can see, the numbers are a little bit closer when you're just comparing males to females than comparing minorities to non-minorities. But we did find that differences in females of various ethnic groups, so white females versus black females, was consistent with what we found with the total white population versus the total black population. So we found that black and Hispanic women participated at a higher rate than their male counterparts, but contributed a slightly lower percentage. And black and Hispanic women participated less than Asian and white women. Black and Hispanic women also contributed less than Asian and white women. So black women contributed at a rate about 3.3%, while Asian women contributed at a rate about 6.6%, so almost half as much percentage-wise. As you can see, males across all racial groups had more invested in equities than females. Asians and white females, again, were slightly more invested in equities than black and Hispanic females. We also found that except for Hispanics, males across all racial groups were slightly less likely to have a loan outstanding than women of the same race. Black and Hispanic women were far more likely to have a loan outstanding than Asian and white women. So for example, black women had a 40% rate of having a loan, while white women had a rate of about 20%. And then for withdrawals, we found that black females were far more likely to have taken a withdrawal than black males. So black women took out withdrawals at 8.6% versus black males at 6.2%. For all other groups, withdrawals were approximately the same for men and women. Just quickly, we had some recommendations from the study, the most important being encourage employers and government to collect and report their retirement plan data by race, incorporate financial literacy in the education curriculum, especially at the state level, and modify 401k loan requirements to decrease the likelihood of default when employees terminate. So, give a longer repayment period, allow periodic repayment, and make loans portable from employer to employer. And then finally, the next steps. We believe that the Great Recession has probably impacted 401k savings for minorities even more now. This is just based on the fact that minorities have experienced a much higher rate of unemployment, which has affected their retirement savings. So you're going to see a lot more loan defaults. You're going to see less money put towards retirement. Ariel will continue to do the Black Investor Survey on a biannual basis going forward, and OPM is committed to reviewing TSP characteristics on a regular basis going forward. We believe that an updated Ariel Hewitt study using post-Great Recession data should be very compelling. And Ariel and Aon and Hewitt are currently exploring ways to conduct a study in 2011 using 2010 data. Study scope may be expanded to include more behavioral analysis, so the impact of automatic enrollment and issues like that. We plan to use mostly records that are in our record-keeping system, enabling a much deeper and granular analysis so that we can have a much bigger population, a lot more characteristics, and be able to have more longitudinal data. We're also going to try to do a couple of case studies included in that study at companies that have instituted positive changes in participant behavior. We're going through the process of identifying one or two companies that we believe have done that so far. And then finally, we're going to do employee and employer surveys to gauge sentiment at these companies to see what they feel about, are the materials targeted properly towards different races, different age groups? Are the employers doing the best things they can to educate the employees? The employees feel like the employers are going out of their way to kind of make sure that they have enough choices or too many choices or whatever the case may be. And then employers on the confidence they feel towards the job that they're doing and educating their employees about their 401k plans. Finally, I just want to leave you with our contact information just in case anyone else is interested in getting more data about this. Our study is on our website, and I believe it's still on Aon Hewitt's website. So it's www.arielinvestments.com or www.aonhewitt.com. Thank you.